The only reason I survived was because I healed myself every single day. I made a mission that no matter if I was being beaten up or tortured, whatever was going on, I spoke to myself like my own personal champion, like my own personal advocate, with so much love, so much compassion, so much kindness.
Hey guys, it's Matt Haycox here, and welcome to another episode of the Matt Haycox Show. And today I've got a guest who's joining us to talk about all things wellness and the importance of looking after our minds, bodies and souls. I think my soul needs a bit of work, a bit of cleansing. She is an award-winning writer, podcaster, international speaker and all-around expert on everything to do with stress management, Reiki, mindfulness and holistic performance coach. She's a co-author of the best-selling book, The Law of Brand Attraction, and I know there's going to be loads of valuable insights to take away from today's chat. So it's a hugely important area that we could all get to know more about. So welcome to the show, Alice Law.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, thanks a lot for being here. I mean, I guess, to contextualise the time, I mean, we are, mid-October 2020. We're very, very deep into Corona, COVID time, and mental health, something that's becoming talked about. Well, I mean, it was heavily talked about prior to COVID, but I think particularly now, as everyone's getting more and more pissed off with being locked in the houses, and you'll hear anything from, mental health issues are increasing through to mental health issues are a ticking time bomb waiting to go off because of COVID. So I guess it's a great time to be talking about this. I mean, just to set the scene for you, fashion designer to stress expert, mindfulness coach, etc. I mean, how did that journey happen?
Yeah, it was not what I planned, that's for sure. But it was, I wanted to be a fashion designer. Thought I went to go and work for Net-a-Porter briefly after uni. Thought I wanted to set up my own line. Needed to get a job on the side, so I went to go and work for a Russian finance company as a PA to earn some money, and then was starting to do my designing of my line, and then basically just got completely sideswiped by life events. And so I experienced what I call stress in every dimension of my life at once. So our eldest sister sadly got cancer, and that was a 4-year battle. And then we sadly lost her to cancer. And at the same time, our dad very sadly was under a lot of pressure financially from businesses, lost his companies, had to sell our homes. And it was just sort of completely, when you think the rug's been pulled out from underneath you. And I watched my dad really, really suffer with depression. Later got made redundant myself because my bosses moved abroad, had a breakup. Just all these things kept happening. And I realized I needed to cope with stress differently. Otherwise I wasn't gonna, make it. I was very anxious all the time. And how were you coping at the time? I mean, were you kind of learning to cope for yourself, or were you taking advice and external input? Yeah, I mean, at first I was doing the classic thing that everyone does, distraction, just going out too much, exactly, and then just making myself even more anxious. And because I was 25 at the time, when it was around that time that I just didn't get noticed because everyone was doing it, do you know what I mean? But I wasn't doing the right things for myself, and I realized that something had to change. And I was like, right, I just started learning everything that I now do. So I just delved into mindset work, mindfulness. I think the first podcast I listened to was Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, and all the amazing guests she took, has on. And I just started to develop a new way of thinking, being and doing. And stumbled across energy healing, which I didn't know. You didn't know what the hell that was before.
Is that the Reiki?
Yeah, exactly. And realized how they all pulled me out of this, and how I needed to then use that. So I started to, and having, we lost our dad to stress-related illness just over a year ago. And for me, I realised how important that is. And obviously, I know it's probably a raw point still, but so I don't want to delve too deep in it for you. But just so we understand, I mean, what does, what is a stress-related illness that takes your life? I mean, Dad, he got cancer again, but that wasn't actually even what took his life. He actually died from a burst stomach ulcer that caused internal complications. Okay. And you think, a stomach ulcer caused from stress. Yeah, exactly. It was 5 years of stress, and I watched him. I think that was one of the greatest losses for me. It was watching him change from this charismatic, dynamic human, so happy, to someone who was just completely overwhelmed with stress and grief, and just watch that, really change his mind, his mindset, and then eventually his health, which was just really, really awful to see. And I just don't want other people to have to go through that themselves or watch people they love go through that, because there's so many things to help us now.
I mean, why do you think there's so much more awareness of it now? I mean, is it just that there's more awareness of it and it was always heavily there? Or is it, that there is genuinely more of it now because, I don't know, maybe life circumstances are making us more stressed, or and again, without, let's say, trivializing certain people's, mental health issues, do you think there's jumping on the bandwagon as well with a lot of people?
I think there's like the two sides to it, in that there's a lot more stress because we, for example, when we're stressed, you have macro and micro stresses. So macro are the big life events like we're talking about, divorce, death, losing a company, all these things. Micro are basically the little stress doses every single person in the Western world gets every day, unless they're Yoda on a beach.
I'm late for work.
Exactly, I'm late for work, I lost my car keys, the upsetting news headline, all these things. And these build up over time in the same way in your body and your mind as, the big ones do, unless they're dealt with. So our system's constantly been flooded with these things when we live in this world that we now do, where social media is everywhere and everyone's expected to be available all the time. So I think that change has really, seen an increase. But equally, when you say, people hopping on the bandwagon, I think with stress, everything is completely unique to your perspective that you've had. So what might cause me stress might not cause you stress. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. I mean, I had someone on my podcast who said his dad was always in hospital when he was younger. And then he didn't find hospital stressful because he grew up with it. But, when someone's thrown into that later in life, that's the most stressful thing they've dealt with because it's never been in their sort of like environment or their reality.
Well, I guess, a couple of questions, let's say from a personal perspective. I know we started to talk about this a little bit before we filmed. And, for me, I've had, I don't consider myself a stressful person in the slightest, but, I've had one or two major stressful events during my life. Was one which I talk about heavily is, was my bankruptcy issues back in 2008, and I guess there's been other things along the way which cause stress. But I guess for me, my combating of stress is understanding of a situation, is having a solution, is having certainty to that problem. And I know, like, a lot of the time I might be getting stressed because I've got 25 hours of work to do in 24 hours to do it, or whatever the expression is, and a lot of people turn around and say, oh, you need a holiday, you need to turn your phone off and go on a beach and relax. And my attitude is like, what fucking planet are you on? If I turn my phone off and go on a beach for a week, then I'm going to come back with another week's problems and more things, more issues on top. And for me, the solution is to fix those issues, to get the work done, to solve the problems, whatever it may be. Maybe not take any more on in the meantime, so I can actually get that done. But all the mindfulness and meditation and dark rooms in the world isn't going to fix those problems for me. I need to practically get the stuff done. I mean, how does that situation compare to issues where people are, I guess, genuinely anxious and suffering, and maybe the problems aren't so solvable?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's like a long-winded story and question, but does that make sense to get a question out of?
No, it does. I think, for example, what you were saying, you needing to deal with your problems in that situation, mindfulness and all those tools in that sense, what they help in that situation is help you to respond instead of react, so that you can actually perform better to the stressful situations that you're having to deal with at work, and you have that space in your mind. So meditation, for example, it weakens a center in our brain nicknamed the me center, which is basically your worry, your worry. And when you weaken that from meditation, that synapses, that connection, you actually find you have that space to pause within yourself, so you can actually deal with these stressful things more. But for extreme anxiety and stress and all these ongoing like actual emotions that people are feeling and dealing with every day, I always say people, you wouldn't expect to have a shiny white smile and not brush your teeth, but everyone expects to feel amazing all the time, but they don't look after their minds or themselves. And so I think being responsible for the fact that we live in this society now that is so fast-paced, is so everything all the time, we actually have to start treating our mind, looking after it the same way you treat going to the gym. Make it as important as your body. That's the sort of key to it all. And then see how you have a sort of stable base to then deal with things off because these huge things are always going to arise. And I'd love to say that no one's ever going to experience stress. That's just not the reality. But if we can learn to have this base, this strength to build, to deal, all these huge things that happen off, you end up dealing with it a lot better.
I like to say, obviously, everyone has different things that stress them, and maybe different levels of what they can take. And I know, obviously, over your career and your life, you've met lots of interesting people who you've probably learned some lessons from. And we were talking about a couple before we started recording. Tell me about some of those, interesting characters, those extreme situations, and I guess what you've been able to take away from it.
Yeah, it's so I love hearing all these things from people. And I think one of the ones that really stuck with me most was a guy I had on my podcast. He's a man called Nick Yaris, who was on death row for 22 years in America for a crime he didn't commit, for the rape and murder of a woman he'd never even met. And he was put into prison at a time when DNA testing wasn't a thing. So it was just, awful. That actually came out halfway through, and he was slipped a newspaper that said, DNA testing's now a thing. And he thought, this is how I get off because I know I'm innocent. It took another 11 years. He was in Pennsylvania.
He was on death row for 33 years?
For 22, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he was in Pennsylvania on a block that had legal active torture at the time. So he was tortured for something he didn't do for 22 years. Horrific conditions. He said guys committed suicide on the block every week, And I said, how did you survive? And there's such a thing in the wellness industry and, coaching industry, positive thinking and positive talk to ourselves. And I know the importance of it, but I never knew how important it was until he told me this. He was like, the only reason I survived was because I healed myself every single day. I made a mission that no matter if I was being beaten up or tortured or whatever was going on, I spoke to myself like my own personal champion, like my own personal advocate, with so much love, so much compassion, so much kindness, that I actually healed myself. And he didn't even have to see a therapist or anyone after that awful experience of leaving that. And I just thought that's the power of actually talking to yourselves well internally. People don't realize how much of an effect that internal conversation has on you. It's the same emotional reaction inside if you say something horrible to me now as if I say something horrible to myself or something nice, and that's the thing. How would you feel all day if you're going around and you had someone nice saying lovely things to you? You'd feel amazing when you came home. Equally, if you had someone following you around saying crap things to you all day, you'd feel, awful. And that's exactly what we're doing to ourselves internally. So the greatest thing to learn from him is just how powerful that is, and just being aware of how you're talking to yourself.
It's probably more a question for him than you, but I don't know if you know the answer. But was he saying, did he not feel different during the first 11 years as the second? Because I can kind of imagine the positivity in the second 11 years. When you've seen the DNA testing and you know there might be a route out. But for those first 11 years, he was just waiting to die every day, and he still kept himself positive.
Yeah, he just said he had to, because he was, he also looked out for someone he now recently has just got released from death row after advocating for him since then. And so he was like putting something outside of myself, like kindness, as well as being kind to myself, was the two things that got me through it.
Any other stories, any other people you can share?
Yeah, something that I learned, we were talking about this earlier off camera, Mark and I were saying that a guy who I interviewed who has a smart supplement brand called The Heights, it's for your brain, and he had insomnia really badly and didn't understand why, and he was in tech at the time, and he then realized it was a nutritional imbalance in his brain from a protein. And so many people have sleep disorders and everything that people suffer with now, and I think it's so fascinating to know that this can actually just be like an imbalance of the things you need, the natural things you need. And that's now his whole brand. And it's, an amazing smart supplement called The Heights for your brain. And I think one of the main things I learned from him is just thinking about, going down the alternative routes instead of just thinking, right, I need to plaster on a prescription to this. So many people choose that option because it's the easy way instead of healing themselves naturally. And I'm not saying like there's not room for medicine. Of course, there absolutely is.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I was thinking when you were just talking about that, where do you draw the line between stuff that can be solved, problems that can be solved with mindfulness, with meditation, with self-care, and when does something become a genuine medical issue that needs medicating? Yeah,
I think it's all down to trying it at the point where you're not at breaking point. So when you realize, okay, I need some help now, trying those alternative routes and seeing how it helps. And Reiki, for example, is actually the only alternative therapy that the NHS actually has for cancer patients and things like that. But so many people have this idea about Reiki being, it's too woo-woo, what even is Reiki? But these kind of things, they can complement, the other treatments. That's the point as well. You don't have to have an either or. And that's why I think having a holistic, approach to, your mindset and your health is really, really important.
So I always like to get some takeaways from these podcasts for my audience, and I know you've got a 5-minute morning routine. So that sounds a perfect training camp for it. What do we need to do, and what would it do for us?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this: before you do your morning routine, the first thing I can say to everyone is the biggest thing is just put your phone on airplane mode before you go to bed. And then don't put it back on until you've done your 5 minutes in the morning, because what that teaches your mind to do again is respond instead of react to the day. Because if you pick up your phone straight away and you see, upsetting headlines like they're everywhere at the moment, or those stressful emails, a million things you need to answer to, your brain automatically goes into react instead of response for the rest of the day. So you want to have that space for yourself. So do that, get an old school alarm, or put your phone on airplane mode and have it away from you. And then just first thing I'd say is gratitude in the morning. So when you think of 5 things you're grateful for and you actually feel gratitude as well, it's always connecting the link of the feeling to the thought. So the physiology really ingrains it in your system. Then you want to think of 5 things and say them out loud or write them down. And what that again does is helps your subconscious look for the good and the rest of the day, the things to be grateful for instead of the things to be annoyed with.
Would you say that's typically like the same 5 things you think of before you start this process, and you're saying it every day, or do you kind of
No, they're different things.
Think on the spot?
Yeah, I think on the spot, definitely. It's like, it can be your morning coffee that day, or something you think you're doing, someone you love, all these little things. And it doesn't have to be some huge thing. Like, even the smallest things really have an effect. Appreciating like your hot shower, all those little things. Then I always say, moving on to meditation, if, for the 5-minute one, just doing 2 minutes of breathing meditation. And that's simply, we don't breathe well when we're stressed. We breathe very shallowly. And what that tells our body is that we are under attack. So you want to say like everything's fine to your body and take some really deep breaths and breathe actually through your diaphragm instead of your chest. So just taking, 2 minutes to think, breathe in through your nose. It's a breath sequence I do called the 4-4-8, because it's really simple to remember. Simply breathe in for 4, hold for 4, and out for 8. So you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just, repeat that 3 times in the morning and just like ground yourself. Just feel that calmness before you start. And then, you want to move on to the end is just an intention or an affirmative statement. So with an intention, setting up an intention for how you want your day to go. Whether that's a feeling like I intend to be happy today, or whether it's actually, you wanted to intend to have a good meeting if that's where you're going first. So set an intention, because that's a really powerful thing for your mind and your energy. So when it comes to energy, the expression is, focus goes where energy flows. And energy flows where focus goes. So if you set an intention, you're telling your mind and your energy that's what you want to get out of the day. And that's a really positive thing to start with.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. I will start by putting my phone on aeroplane mode. I think even before I meditate, I know that's. I'm always looking over at the bedside table through the night, and I think we probably maybe a point to talk about earlier, but I know over the last year or so, I've very much tried to not get distracted by so many things like that. It's very easy. I know, like if I'm busy, when I sit down in front of the telly at night, I've always got, I don't so much anymore because I'm getting better, but up until a year or so, I'd always have my laptop there, kind of trying to do some emails, trying to do some work. But the reality is, for that 2 or 3 hours I'm looking at it, if I got 5 minutes useful work out of that 2 hours, it'd probably be top end. I think it is then trying to put the effort into relaxing and concentrating on having the quality time rather than the quantity time.
Yeah, definitely.
But thanks a lot for being here. Obviously, you have some really interesting points and some really interesting advice. Where can people hear more, find more? Where can they listen to your podcast?
Yeah, thank you. It's Lawali Life, so it's my name backwards.
You're gonna have to spell
seeing
that.
Things from a different perspective. It's Lawali. And then Life, Life, and that's my name for my podcast and Instagram, and my website, and also LinkedIn and Facebook. So it's all under that name and my name, Alice Law. So yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks a lot for being here. And guys, thanks a lot for listening. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you enjoyed listening to Alice as much as I did. I'm definitely going to look forward to trying some meditation with my phone turned off tomorrow morning. If you like the podcast, make sure you press like. If you don't already subscribe to the YouTube channel, please subscribe. You can get us on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts, YouTube, Insta, everywhere. So make sure you check it out and tell your friends. I look forward to seeing you again next time.